If there's an equivalent to hell on earth, North Korea might just be the place. Its government is the world's most oppressive regime. The regime keeps the North Korean population in social isolation from the rest of the world and pumps them all full of propaganda, which elevates the family of the country's founder, Kim Il-sung, to essentially divine status. Consuming information from the outside world, like American or South Korean movies, can get one killed, or arguably worse, sent to one of the country's notorious concentration camps. To make matters still worse for the North Korean people outside the capital of Pyongyang, they are kept in a state of food scarcity and subsistence to make them even weaker. And perhaps worst of all, the country itself is now an open-air concentration camp for the North Korean people, with escape increasingly becoming all but impossible. Let's take a look at why North Korea was always so hard to escape from, and what Kim Jong-Un has done to make escape even more difficult still. Leaving North Korea is usually not legally permissible. The only North Koreans who can go abroad, not including the country's diplomats, are laborers with special dispensation from the regime. Experts estimate that hundreds of thousands of North Korean laborers work in places everywhere from the Middle East to South America and even Europe. However, these trips abroad are no get-out-of-jail card. All of the workers are accompanied by the regime's overseers and are not permitted to leave the premises of their workstations or designated dormitories. Doing so would be legally considered as treason and carry the same penalty as escaping the country itself. This penalty could include death or imprisonment in one of the regime's concentration camps. Even if a defector manages to escape successfully, that person's family could face the penalty of the escapee's crimes. This has always been a deterrent that made potential defectors think twice, but others were brave enough to try. But aside from its oppressive laws, North Korea's geography makes it particularly difficult to get out of. Most successful North Korean defectors have ultimately fled to South Korea, which is their first country of choice. There, they're considered full citizens and get some financial aid to get settled into a new lifestyle and society. However, a direct escape from North to South Korea is nearly impossible, as it would entail a direct crossing of the demilitarized zone, the most heavily fortified piece of real estate on Earth. Since 1996, only about 20 people have successfully made it across. The most famous one was Oh Chung-song in 2017, who was shot 5 times and lost half his blood during the attempt. For most North Koreans, though, escaping across the country's southern border through the DMZ is completely impractical, so they have no choice but to seek alternative and much longer routes. The Korean peninsula, as its name suggests, has water on 3 of its sides. Maritime escape attempts are rare, however. Most North Koreans have no access to ships. Even those who can take to water must deal with the routine patrols of the North Korean Navy, which are especially heavily concentrated in areas close to the maritime border with South Korea. Despite these obstacles, a few have tried and succeeded. The most recent maritime escape came in late October 2023, with a group of 4 North Koreans crossing the sea border into South Korea in a small wooden boat. South Korean authorities intercepted the vessel near the city of Sokcho, about 51 kilometers northeast of Seoul, and subsequently resettled the defectors. There have been 3 successful escapes of North Korean defectors into Japan. The first came in 1987, when a boat carrying 13 defectors washed ashore in Fuki Prefecture in southwestern Honshu. These defectors later went to South Korea by way of Taiwan. In 2007, a group of 4 defectors came ashore in Aomori Prefecture, the northernmost in Honshu, and were also sent on their way to South Korea. Finally, in 2011, 9 North Koreans, 3 men, 3 women, and 3 children were rescued by the Japanese Coast Guard after they ran out of fresh water and had only 13 gallons of fuel in their boat. They too were eventually settled in South Korea. Despite their hardship, these defectors were the lucky ones. Most North Koreans have no choice but to escape through the country's northern borders with China and Russia. Far fewer have chosen to escape across the 17-kilometer border with Russia at the Tumen River. This border is easily defended, and in 2014, Russia and North Korea enacted an agreement that would deport defectors in the former's territory back to their homeland. As a result, small numbers of North Koreans live in the Russian Far East. Kyung-hee University estimated the number at 10,000, but this study came in 2006, and the number is probably even fewer today. If North Korean defectors escape across the border with Russia, they would then need to journey to the South Korean consulate in Vladivostok across a landscape where they could easily be recognized. Unsurprisingly, the Russian route is not popular with escapees. North Korea's border with China is over 1,300 kilometers long across the Yalu and Tumen rivers. The size and treachery of the terrain mean that this border has historically been more sparsely defended. The rivers also freeze in the winter and can be waded in the summer, making this by far the most popular method of escape. There is a significant population of ethnic Koreans in China too, so defectors can more easily fit in and evade detection there than they would in Russia. There is a problem though. China and North Korea are allies, and the former's policies to consider defectors as illegal immigrants. If found, the Chinese authorities deport North Korean defectors back across the border, where imprisonment in a concentration camp and/or death awaits them. In the early 2000s, China increased its patrols around South Korean diplomatic buildings. Images of Chinese law enforcement separating North Korean families outside of these buildings spread rapidly, but the international pressure did not get Beijing to change its policies. One incident even had Chinese police struggling with South Korean diplomats to drag a defector outside of embassy grounds. This defector was taken away and separated from his son, who made it in. This is only the tip of the iceberg over how unwelcoming China is for North Korean defectors, however. Originally, there was generally an even balance between men and women escaping North Korea. Since the 1990s, however, most defectors into Chinese territory are women. These women are routinely trafficked and forced into the sex trade. A 2019 report by the Korea Future Initiative estimated that 60% of female North Korean refugees were forced into some form of sexual slavery. Other reports put the number as high as 80 or 90%. Demand for North Korean brides is also high in China, as the country's long-standing one-child policy has left many men unable to find wives. Once forced into marriages, these women are routinely mistreated because the authorities consider them illegal immigrants. Overall, demand for North Korean women in China amounted to a $105 million industry in 2019. If defectors can successfully pass through the border, the captivity of the human trafficking industry, and Chinese law enforcement, they have two options: make it to a South Korean or other friendly diplomatic building, or escape to one of China's neighboring countries. Both are daunting tasks. The closest South Korean building to the North Korean border is in the city of Shenyang. But as we've mentioned, China stepped up its law enforcement patrols around the South's consulates and embassies around the turn of the century. And because of its proximity, the one in Shenyang is among the most heavily guarded. The South Korean diplomatic properties are not the only ones with heavy patrols either. In September 2004, a group of 44 North Korean refugees scaled the walls of the Canadian embassy in Beijing and applied for asylum. Some of them were disguised as construction workers. The Chinese regime did not forget this experience and stepped up patrols around all foreign diplomatic buildings that would prove friendly to the cause of the North Korean refugees. Because China is now the world's most sophisticated surveillance state, escape into a foreign embassy or consulate is now a very tall task for wayward North Koreans. With the diplomatic route cut off, the only practical ways to escape from North Korea's clutches is for defectors to get out of China and go to a country which will send them to South Korea. This presents a great obstacle in itself. China is the world's fourth largest country in total land area. Escaping from it requires one to traverse this vast land and evade detection from the authorities at every turn. To make matters worse, many of China's neighbors are unfriendly to North Korean refugees. There are only two realistic nearby nations that North Korean refugees can safely escape to: Mongolia and Thailand. Each of these countries tends to deport North Korean refugees to South Korea. Each also comes with its own unique difficulty in reaching, however. To get to Mongolia, escapees must traverse the Gobi Desert. Temperatures in the Gobi Desert can reach negative 23 degrees Celsius in the night in winter and 34 degrees on a summer day. The treachery of navigating this almost featureless terrain with its temperature swings and wild animals is daunting enough, but Chinese border patrols have also become more aggressive in recent years, meaning that this route has become less popular. However, if North Korean refugees can make it, they can surrender to Mongolian authorities and after processing get deported to South Korea. Thailand is the most popular intermediate destination for North Korean defectors. Documents leaked by WikiLeaks have revealed that the Thai and South Korean governments have had the procedures in place to smoothly expedite the transfer of North Korean refugees since at least 2009. In the 2000s and early 2010s, thousands of North Korean refugees reached South Korea by way of Thailand. Unfortunately for the refugees, Thailand is very far from the North Korean border, and they must move through thousands of kilometers of hostile territory to get there. To make matters worse, China and Thailand do not border one another. Instead, China shares borders with Vietnam, Laos, and Myanmar. Vietnam tends to deport North Korean defectors within its borders back to China, which will in turn deport them back to North Korea. This legalism, and the fact that Vietnam does not border Thailand, means it's not a good option for the refugees. Of the other two countries, most defectors choose to go through Laos for understandable reasons, but this is still a treacherous path, requiring travelers to traverse mountains in China and then jungles, climaxing at a crossing of the Mekong River on the border with Thailand. Through this journey, defectors must continue to evade the authorities, because Laos's policy is also to deport them back to North Korea. Once in Thailand, refugees can surrender to local authorities and after processing eventually be deported to South Korea. As you might have guessed by now, no matter how North Korean refugees choose to undertake the journey, it will always be extremely challenging, and these people are poorly positioned to make a successful escape on their own. That's why most of them pay brokers, and these brokers can cost tens of thousands of dollars, funds that North Koreans ordinarily cannot access. And as we've mentioned, many of these brokers are traders who sell their North Korean customers into forced labor as brides or into the sex trade. Despite these life-threatening obstacles, the human drive for freedom remains so strong that hundreds of thousands of North Korean refugees have fled the country over the years. 200,000 may live in China now. Of these, only about 33,000 have made it to South Korea, and escaping the Hermit Kingdom is becoming even harder. The number of North Korean escapees climbed through the years Kim Jong-un was in power. The famine early in his reign from 1994 to 1998 ensured that many would flee abroad, looking for food, and even after the worst was over, thousands continued to flee. The number peaked at 2,914 escapees in 2009. Things began to change once Kim Jong-un took the Hermit Kingdom's throne, however. Kim Jong-un's tenure has been marked by improvement in North Korea's relations with its neighboring authoritarian countries, which means that there are fewer safe options for refugees to escape to. The agreement with Russia in 2014 was only one example of this. Kim Jong-un also steadily strengthened North Korea's internal border security. The new security infrastructure on the border includes many more high-tech surveillance systems. Signal jammers were also built along the border to ban foreign GPS signals. These constructions have even interfered with international shipping and aviation. New physical border fortifications have been built as well. Kim Jong-un built new border fences with razor wire and increased patrols around them. North Korea has assistance from China in ensuring that escape has become all but impossible. Since Xi Jinping took power in Beijing in 2012, China has become increasingly more authoritarian and surveillance-intensive, making it even easier for Chinese law enforcement to catch escaping North Koreans and send them back to torture and death. The increase in security is forcing the brokers to charge more money too, meaning that even fewer North Korean people can afford to make a realistic attempt at escape, because it would require defectors to get past the border checkpoints and then traverse a massive surveillance state like China completely on their own. Then came COVID-19. Since 2019, the flow of North Korean refugees has decreased to a small trickle. Only 229 were recorded in 2020, and fewer than 100 in 2021 and 2022. The number will be slightly higher, but still similar in 2023. The pandemic made the already darkening situation for would-be North Korean defectors close to pitch black. On January 23, 2020, Pyongyang announced that it would be sealing its borders to keep the virus out of the country. Kim Jong-un even halted the foreign trade with China that his regime depends on. Containing COVID-19 became a point of regime propaganda. It was not until May 2022, long past the point that most of the rest of the world had returned to pre-pandemic normalcy, that the North Korean regime even announced it had detected the virus within its borders. To maintain this propaganda, the regime continued to take harsh measures. As part of the new border controls, North Korean soldiers patrolling the northern borders were ordered to kill anyone approaching these lines of demarcation without official permission. New border fortifications were added on top of existing ones. Even more border fences with razor wire have been built all along the north, cutting off the routes that defectors and their supporters have traditionally used. In other words, North Korea's northern borders with China and Russia increasingly resemble the DMZ. The Kim regime has also made domestic travel in the North Korean interior much more difficult. North Korean residents can no longer travel between the country's provinces without official permission, on pain of being imprisoned in one of the concentration camps. This new law means that those in the interior of the country will be hard-pressed to even approach the border at all. For North Korean people, their treatment in their own country is beginning to resemble the way that they are treated if they actually manage to get past the border and into China. And it's becoming increasingly impossible for North Koreans to communicate with the outside world, too. The GPS jammers on the border make it a lot harder for foreign signals to permeate the country. In their place, Kim Jong-Un is building his own digital security state. North Korean people are only permitted to use specially designed phones created by state-sanctioned companies. These phones cannot call foreign phones and cannot connect to the internet. The phones also come equipped with intrusive spyware that monitors and takes screenshots of a user's activity and prevents any unsanctioned software from being used on the phone. These phones are also subject to the inspection of the police at any time. In this and in other things, North Korea is taking a page out of China's playbook. China's also been assisting its ally in setting up its surveillance state. In 2019, NK News reported that Hikvision, a Chinese state-owned video surveillance equipment manufacturer that's under sanctions from the United States, the European Union, Australia, India, and other countries for its role in the genocide against the Uyghurs and other minority groups in Xinjiang, was in use across a number of facilities in North Korea. The result of the new laws and the new surveillance technology means that it's practically impossible for North Koreans to get the equipment they need to communicate with their family members or anyone else outside of the country. And if you cannot communicate with sympathetic ears who might be able to assist you in such a dangerous task as escaping North Korea, your chances plummet that much further. How is a North Korean defector to pay a broker the exorbitant sum if that defector cannot communicate with family members? Historically, family members in higher-paying jobs in South Korea have been vital support systems to North Korean defectors, but this avenue of support has now been all but cut off, thanks to the new surveillance and digital technology laws from Kim Jong-un's regime. Organizing an escape attempt is a much taller task now than it had been before 2020, much less before Kim Jong-un came to power. Kim Jong-un has shown little inclination to reverse any of the authoritarian advances that the COVID-19 pandemic served as a convenient excuse for, and Russia's ongoing invasion of Ukraine might make the situation even worse for the North Korean people. At his September 2023 summit with Vladimir Putin in Vladivostok, Kim Jong-un agreed to supply the Russian military with some of the artillery shells and rockets it desperately needs against its Ukrainian enemy. It's not yet known what North Korea will get in return for this. The leaders released no joint statement or outlined any objectives for their meeting. However, Kim Jong-un's itinerary in Russia could give a clue. The North Korean dictator toured a number of aerospace facilities in the Russian Far East, and experts assert that Russian satellite technology might be on his shopping list. Such technology would only increase the North Korean security state's reach even further. The combination of geography, geopolitics, the North Korean regime's ruthless disregard for its own people, and new digital technologies has effectively turned the entire country into a concentration camp, one which only offers two outcomes to those unfortunate enough to be born within its borders: bad or worse. When Kim Jong-un took over the North Korean regime in December 2011, there were hopes that his education in Switzerland and love for the United States' National Basketball Association would make him less of a hardliner than his father and grandfather, who were steeped in Cold War-era rivalries with the West. Instead, he's proven even worse than both his predecessors, and there is no end in sight for the North Korean people's suffering. But will this state of affairs last forever? Will new waves of defectors find innovative ways to escape the concentration camp that North Korea has become under Kim Jong-un? Don't forget to let us know in the comments. Also, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more military analysis from military experts.